Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The notification sound from Cassandra's phone cut through the midnight silence like a knife through butter. I'd been lying there for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me. She'd been exhausted from her wellness retreat weekend. But something felt wrong. Call it intuition, call it paranoia. But after 12 years of marriage, you develop a sixth sense about these things. I'm Elliot Roman, and I fix computers for a living. Not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps our little house on Maple Street running. More importantly, it taught me to notice patterns, anomalies, things that don't belong. And my wife getting mysterious texts at midnight definitely didn't belong. The phone buzzed again. Cass stirred but didn't wake. I could see the screen lighting up her face in the darkness. Without thinking, I leaned over and caught a glimpse of the message preview. Using our vacation fund to help Derek. You understand, right? Love you. Derek Lawton, the real estate hotshot with the BMW and the perfect teeth. The same Derek who'd been commenting on all of Cass's social media posts lately with those stupid heart eye emojis. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my ankles. Our vacation fund. The money we'd been saving for 2 years to finally take that trip to Japan. The money that was supposed to be our fresh start, our chance to reconnect after months of growing apart. I slipped out of bed as quietly as possible and grabbed my laptop from the kitchen table. My hands shook slightly as I logged into our joint account. The balance made me feel sick. Half of it was gone. $15,000, transferred yesterday while I was at work. Son of a gun, I whispered to the empty kitchen. But here's the thing about being married to someone who thinks you're just a harmless computer nerd. They underestimate you, badly. I opened a new browser window and transferred my half of the remaining funds into my personal account. Then I did something I'd never imagined doing in a million years. I booked a one-way ticket to Tokyo, departing in 3 days. If she wanted to play games with our future, fine, but she was going to play alone. The sun was coming up by the time I finished my preparations. I'd changed all the passwords on our shared accounts, transferred the car title from her name to mine. She'd signed the paperwork months ago for what she thought was an insurance update, and gathered every piece of evidence I could find of her recent activities. Cass wandered into the kitchen around 8, looking perfectly innocent in her fuzzy robe and messy hair. She always looked beautiful in the morning, which made this whole situation that much more painful. "Morning, honey," she said, reaching for her phone on the counter. "Sleep okay?" "Like a baby," I replied, sipping my coffee. "How was your retreat?" She launched into some elaborate story about meditation and chakras, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching her face, looking for tells. The way she avoided eye contact when she mentioned her roommate Leela, the slight flush in her cheeks when she talked about the healing exercises they'd done. "That's nice," I said when she finished. "By the way, I transferred some money around this morning. You might want to check the account." She grabbed her phone and started tapping. I watched her expression change from casual interest to confusion to outright panic. "Eli, where's the money? Our vacation fund is nearly empty." "Funny story about that," I said, setting down my coffee mug. "Seems like someone already helped themselves to half of it." Something about helping Derek. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then the defensive walls went up. "I can explain that. Derek was in trouble, and save it." I stood up and walked toward the garage door. "Your phone and laptop are in my workshop. You can have them back when you're ready to have an honest conversation." "You can't just take my things." "Watch me." I spent the next hour in my workshop, going through her devices. The password was our anniversary date, which felt like another small betrayal. Her text history with Derek painted a picture I really didn't want to see. Months of flirtation, secret meetings, and finally, the request for money to help him out of some bad real estate deal. But the worst part wasn't the affair. It was the way they talked about me. "Eli won't notice," she'd written. "He's too busy with his computers to pay attention to real life." Wrong on both counts, sweetheart. When I emerged from the workshop, Cass was pacing the living room like a caged animal. She'd gotten dressed and done her makeup, probably thinking she could charm her way out of this mess. "We need to talk," she said. "Now you want to talk? After months of sneaking around behind my back? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." I pulled out printed copies of her text messages and dropped them on the coffee table. "Derek Lawton, Cass? Really? The guy who sells overpriced condos to desperate families." She stared at the papers like they might burst into flames. "How did you?" I fix computers for a living, remember? I know how to recover deleted messages, trace financial transactions, and track digital footprints. You've been sloppy. For the first time since I'd known her, Cassandra Roman was speechless. She sank onto the couch, her perfectly manicured hands trembling slightly. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. But it did, and now you need to decide what you're going to do about it. She looked up at me with those green eyes that had made me fall in love with her 15 years ago. What do you want me to do? I want you to figure out your priorities, because I'm done being taken for granted. I headed toward the bedroom to finish packing. Behind me, I heard her phone ringing. Probably Derek, wondering where his bailout money was. Eli, wait, she called after me. We can work this out. Maybe, I said without turning around. But first, you're going to find out what it feels like to lose something important. The look of panic on her face was almost worth the heartbreak. Almost. By noon, Cass had left 17 voicemails and sent 43 text messages. I ignored them all while I sat at the Rookery, our town's only decent bar, nursing a beer and planning my next move. Jules Martinez, the bartender, had been watching the local drama unfold for 20 years. Nothing happened in this town without Jules knowing about it, which made her invaluable for intelligence gathering. You look like someone stole your lunch money, she said, refilling my glass. Something like that. I glanced around the bar. It was the usual crowd of retirees and shift workers, but no sign of Derek Lawton. Hey, Jules, you know Derek Lawton, right? The real estate guy? Her expression soured. That peacock? Yeah, I know him. Comes in here sometimes, flashing his money around, hitting on anything with a pulse. Why? Just curious. He been around lately. Matter of fact, he was here last night, bragging to anyone who'd listen about some married woman he's been seeing. Real classy guy. She leaned closer. You want some free advice? Stay away from that one. He's trouble with a capital T. I smiled grimly. Thanks for the warning. My phone buzzed with another text from Cass. Please call me. We can fix this. Too little, too late, sweetheart. My Uncle Mick walked in around 2 o'clock, still carrying himself like the cop he'd been for 30 years before retirement. He spotted me immediately and slid into the booth across from me. Heard through the grapevine you're having some domestic difficulties, he said without preamble. News travels fast in this town. Faster than you think. Cassandra's been calling everyone we know, trying to get them to talk sense into you. Says you've lost your mind over some misunderstanding. I showed him the printed text messages. His weathered face hardened as he read. That's no misunderstanding, nephew. That's betrayal. He handed the papers back. What are you planning to do about it? I'm working on it, but I could use some advice on the legal aspects, hypothetically speaking. Mick's eyes twinkled with something that might have been approval. Hypothetically, of course. What did you have in mind? We spent the next hour discussing various scenarios, all completely hypothetical, naturally. Mick had a surprisingly creative mind when it came to making someone's life difficult without actually breaking any laws. The key, he said, is to let them destroy themselves. Give them enough rope, and they'll hang themselves with it. Hypothetically. Absolutely hypothetically. I left the Rookery with a much clearer picture of my options. The afternoon sun felt warmer, and for the first time in months, I had a genuine smile on my face. Derek Lawton's BMW was parked outside his real estate office when I drove by. Shiny, expensive, and completely unguarded. I parked around the corner and walked back, carrying a small bag of supplies I'd picked up at the grocery store. The beauty of a small town is that everyone minds everyone else's business, but they do it from behind curtains and closed doors. As long as you look like you belong, you can get away with almost anything in broad daylight. I slipped a raw shrimp under his driver's seat, way back where he'd never find it. Then I smeared petroleum jelly under all the door handles. Nothing permanent, nothing that would actually damage the car, but definitely something he'd remember. My phone rang as I was walking back to my car. Cass, again. This time. I answered. Eli, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been busy. Look, I know you're upset, but you're blowing this out of proportion. Derek needed help, and I was just being a good friend. A good friend doesn't give away her husband's vacation money without asking. It's not gone forever. He's going to pay it back. When? Silence. That's what I thought. Face it, Cass. You got played. That's not true. Derek cares about me. Derek cares about Derek. Always has. Always will. You're just the latest in a long line of women who thought they were special. I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to take it all back and pretend none of this had happened. But that part was getting smaller by the hour. Come home, she whispered. Please, we can work through this. I am home. You're the one who left. I hung up and turned off my phone. Whatever she was going to say next, I didn't want to hear it. That evening, I got a visit from Lila Grant, Cass's best friend and partner in crime. She showed up at my door looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Eli, we need to talk. Do we? Because last I checked, you were helping my wife sneak around behind my back. Lila had the grace to look embarrassed. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought it was just a harmless flirtation. $15,000 worth of harmless flirtation. She's devastated, Eli. She realizes she made a mistake. Good. Maybe she'll think twice before making another one. Leela tried a different approach. Look, I know you're hurt, but you're being cruel. Freezing her out of the bank account, taking her car, locking up her phone. Her car? That's my car. Always has been. Check the title. But she needs transportation. She has a job. Then she should have thought of that before she gave away our savings. Leela's sympathetic expression cracked, revealing something harder underneath. You can't just destroy someone's life because your feelings got hurt. Watch me. After she left, I poured myself a whiskey and sat on my porch, watching the sun set over our quiet neighborhood. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Derek would discover his little surprise. Cass would realize just how serious I was about consequences, and I would take the next step in my carefully planned campaign. The phone rang inside the house. I didn't bother to answer it. Some conversations aren't worth having. The annual Maple Street Festival was the social event of the year in our little town. Everyone came out to see and be seen, which made it the perfect venue for the next phase of my plan. I arrived early and set up my folding chair near the bandstand, where I'd have a clear view of the entire square. Cass wouldn't be able to resist showing up. She lived for this kind of community event, especially when she could play the victim for a sympathetic audience. She appeared around noon, looking appropriately tragic in a black dress that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Derek Lawton walked beside her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. They were putting on quite a show for the locals. What they didn't know was that I'd already been working the crowd for an hour, casually mentioning to anyone who'd listen that my wife had cleaned out our vacation fund to help her boyfriend with his financial troubles. In a town this size, gossip spreads faster than wildfire. Derek looked uncomfortable, which probably had something to do with the smell emanating from his BMW. The shrimp had been working its magic for 3 days now, and the August heat wasn't helping. I'd watched him spend 20 minutes that morning trying to figure out where the stench was coming from. They spotted me across the square and started walking over. I could see Cass saying something urgent to Derek, probably trying to coach him on what to say. Too late for that, buddy. Eli, Cass called out when they got within earshot. I'm so glad you're here. She was putting on her best performance, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. Word of their affair had already made the rounds, and the looks they were getting from our neighbors weren't exactly friendly. Cassandra, Derek. I nodded politely. Enjoying the festival? Derek stepped forward, puffing out his chest like he was still the high school quarterback instead of a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a growing gut. Look, Roman, we need to clear the air about this whole situation. What situation is that? I asked innocently. You know what I'm talking about. The money, the accusations you've been spreading around town. Accusations? I haven't accused anyone of anything. I've simply been sharing the facts. A small crowd was starting to gather, drawn by the tension in Derek's voice. In a town where the biggest excitement was usually the annual pie contest, a public confrontation was premium entertainment. The facts, Derek repeated, his voice getting louder. The facts are that your wife asked me for help, and I provided it. There's nothing wrong with that. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Nothing wrong with helping a friend. Of course, Most friends don't require $15,000 in assistance, but I'm sure you had your reasons. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Derek's face was turning an interesting shade of red. That money was a loan. Really? When are you planning to pay it back? Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. Cass jumped in to rescue him. Eli, please, you're making a scene. Am I? I thought I was just having a conversation with my wife and her friend. I smiled pleasantly. By the way, Derek, how's that car of yours running? I noticed you've been having some trouble with it lately. His eyes narrowed. What do you know about my car? Nothing at all. Just noticed you've been walking more often. Fresh air is good for you. The crowd chuckled. Derek took a step closer, his hands clenched into fists. You think you're real clever, don't you, computer boy? I have my moments. Maybe it's time someone taught you a lesson about respect. The crowd went quiet. This was the moment Derek made his fatal mistake. In front of half the town, he was threatening a man whose wife had publicly betrayed him. The sympathy vote, which had been split, suddenly swung entirely in my direction. I stood up slowly.
She left this in your apron. You didn't even throw it away. You forgot a woman's lipstick in your—
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Never breaking eye contact with Derek. I'm not a big man, but I'm not small either, and 12 years of manual labor had kept me in decent shape. Are you threatening me, Derek? I'm just saying, because it sounds like you're threatening me, in front of all these witnesses. I gestured to the crowd, which had grown to about 30 people. That wouldn't be very smart, would it? Derek realized he'd painted himself into a corner. His tough guy act was falling apart in front of an audience that was clearly on my side. I'm not threatening anyone, he muttered. Good, because that would be illegal, and we're all law-abiding citizens here, aren't we? I sat back down and picked up my soda. As I opened it, I pretended to fumble with the can. The contents splashed all over Derek's expensive polo shirt and khaki pants. Oops, I said. Sorry about that. These cans can be tricky. The crowd burst into laughter. Derek stood there dripping, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Cass grabbed his arm and tried to pull him away, but he was too angry to move. You did that on purpose. Did what? It was an accident. I looked around at the crowd. Everyone saw it was an accident, right? A chorus of agreement rose from the spectators. Derek was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and he knew it. This isn't over, he snarled. No, I agreed. I don't think it is. They left the festival shortly after that, Cass practically dragging Derek away from the scene of his humiliation. I stayed for another hour, accepting condolences and sympathy from neighbors who'd watched my marriage implode in real time. Mrs. Henderson from down the street patted my shoulder maternally. That woman doesn't deserve you, Eli. Everyone can see that now. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means a lot, and it did. For the first time in months, I felt like I had allies instead of just enemies. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw what happened at the festival. Thought you should know, Derek and Cass are planning something. Be careful. A friend. A friend. I smiled and deleted the message. Let them plan. I was 3 steps ahead of them, and they didn't even know the game had started. The festival continued around me, but my mind was already working on the next phase. Derek had shown his true colors in front of the entire town. Now it was time to make sure everyone remembered exactly what kind of man he really was, and what kind of woman my wife had chosen over me. 3 days after the festival, I got the call I'd been expecting. It was from my friend Tony, who worked security at the bank downtown. Ely, you need to know something. Derek Lawton was just in here asking questions about your account. Wanted to know if there was any way to reverse the transfers you made. What did you tell him? Nothing, of course. But he seemed pretty determined. Thought you should have a heads up. I thanked Tony and hung up, so Derek and Cass were escalating. Good. Desperate people make stupid mistakes, and I was counting on them making a big one. That afternoon, I drove to Derek's real estate office. His BMW was parked out front, and I could see him through the window, talking on the phone. He looked agitated, which probably meant he still hadn't found the source of that smell. I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, Cass pulled up in a taxi. She'd been taking cabs everywhere since I'd reclaimed the car, which was costing her a fortune she didn't have. They talked for a few minutes in his office, their body language tense and urgent. Then Derek grabbed his keys, and they headed for his car. Following them was easy. Derek was too angry to pay attention to his surroundings, and Cass was too busy gesturing wildly to notice my truck in the rearview mirror. They led me straight to the Pineview Motel on the outskirts of town, a rundown place that rented rooms by the hour. I parked behind the dumpster and watched them check into room 12. This was perfect, better than I could have hoped for. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my Uncle Mick. Pineview Motel, room 12. Bring the camera. Naz. Then I called Jules at the Rookery. Jules, it's Eli. Remember what you said about Derek bragging to anyone who'd listen? How would you like to give him a bigger audience? What did you have in mind? Meet me at the Pineview in 30 minutes, and bring some friends. The next call was to Brett, Cass's younger brother. Brett was a good kid, just naive enough to be useful and loyal enough to his family to want to help his sister. He also had a key to Cass's apartment, which she'd been staying at since I'd changed the locks on our house. Brett, it's Eli. I need a favor. I don't know, man. Cass said you've been acting crazy lately. I'm sure she did. But I need you to listen to me for 5 minutes. Can you do that? I explained the situation carefully, showing him copies of the text messages and bank records. Brett was shocked, then angry, then confused. I can't believe she'd do something like this, he said finally. I couldn't either, but here we are. What do you need me to do? Just get me into her apartment for 10 minutes. There are some things there that belong to me. It wasn't exactly true, but it wasn't exactly false either. The line between truth and fiction was getting blurrier by the day, and I was finding it easier to live in that gray area. Brett met me at Cass's apartment complex an hour later. He looked nervous, but he let me in without too many questions. 10 minutes, he said. That's all. That's all I need. I went straight to her bedroom and found what I was looking for in her jewelry box. A spare key to Derek's condo, which she'd mentioned having months ago, when she was still pretending they were just friends. She'd probably forgotten all about it. I also grabbed a few other items that actually did belong to me. Some books, a watch, a photo of my parents. Brett watched me carefully, but didn't object to anything I took. She really messed up, didn't she? He said as we left. Yeah, Brett, she really did. That evening, while Derek and Cass were presumably plotting their next move at the motel, I let myself into Derek's condo. It was exactly what I'd expected. All flash and no substance, like the man himself. I didn't do anything dramatic, just a few small adjustments that would make his life more interesting. I loosened the screws on his kitchen cabinet handles so they'd fall off when he tried to use them. I put plastic wrap over the toilet bowl under the seat. I set all his clocks 15 minutes fast, and in his bedroom, I left a small gift, a framed photo of him and Cass from the festival, with a note attached. Thought you'd want a memento of your big moment. ER. It was petty, but pettiness was all I had left. The big gestures, the grand romantic notions, the trust and love and partnership, Derek and Cass had taken all of that and thrown it away for $15,000 and some cheap thrills at a roadside motel. So pettiness it was. I was back home by 9 o'clock, sitting on my porch with a beer and a clear conscience. My phone had been buzzing all evening with calls from Cass, but I ignored them. Whatever crisis she was having could wait until morning. The calls stopped around midnight, which probably meant she'd given up or run out of battery. Either way, it was a peaceful end to a productive day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to watch my carefully constructed plan unfold. Derek and Cass thought they were playing chess, but they didn't realize I'd already won the game. They just hadn't figured it out yet. The showdown came sooner than I expected. I was having coffee on my porch the next morning when Derek's BMW screeched to a halt in my driveway. Both doors flew open, and out came Derek and Cass, looking like they'd slept in their clothes, which, given their recent accommodations at the Pineview Motel, they probably had. We need to talk, Derek announced, striding across my lawn like he owned the place. Good morning to you too, I replied, not bothering to stand up. Coffee? Cut the act, Roman. We know you were in my condo last night. I raised an eyebrow. Was I? That's interesting. How do you figure? Cass stepped forward, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The photo, Eli. The stupid photo you left in his bedroom. What photo would that be? Don't play dumb, Derek snapped. You broke into my home. Did I? That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? Derek's face was turning that familiar shade of red. The proof is sitting on my nightstand. A photo is proof that someone left a photo. It's not proof of breaking and entering. I took a sip of coffee. Besides, how do you know someone broke in? Maybe they had a key. The silence that followed was beautiful. I watched the realization dawn on both their faces. Cass remembering the spare key she'd given Derek. Derek remembering that he'd given it to Cass. Both of them realizing that their secret wasn't as secret as they'd thought. "You've been watching us," Cass said quietly. "Watching you? In this town? I don't need to watch you. Everyone else is doing it for me." It was true. By now, half the town knew about their affair, their motel visits, and Derek's increasingly erratic behavior. The other half would know by lunchtime. "This ends now," Derek said, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're going to stop harassing us, stop spreading lies about us, and stay out of our business. Or what? Or we'll make you stop." I set down my coffee cup and finally stood up. Derek was bigger than me, but he was also soft from years of easy living and minimal exercise. More importantly, he was angry and stupid, which meant he wasn't thinking clearly. "You're threatening me again, Derek." In broad daylight, in front of my house, probably in front of several witnesses. I gestured toward the neighboring houses, where I could see curtains twitching. "That's becoming a habit with you." "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just explaining the situation. The situation is that you're trespassing on my property, making demands you have no right to make, and trying to intimidate someone who hasn't actually done anything wrong." "You sabotaged my car." "Prove it. You broke into my condo." "Prove it. You've been spreading rumors about us all over town." "I've been sharing facts. If you don't like how the facts sound, maybe you should have thought about that before you created them." Derek took a step closer, his hands clenched into fists. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment he'd finally lose control completely and do something irreversibly stupid. "You think you're so smart," he snarled, "but you're just a pathetic little man who can't keep his wife happy." "You're right," I agreed. "I couldn't keep her happy. But then again, neither can you. That's why she's been texting her ex-boyfriend behind your back." Both of them froze. Cass went pale, Derek went red, and I smiled. "Oh, did I forget to mention that? Yeah, I've been monitoring her phone activity. Amazing what you can learn when you have the right software and a suspicious mind." It was a bluff, but a good one. I could see the doubt creeping into Derek's eyes as he looked at Cass, and the panic in her expression as she realized her web of lies was finally collapsing. "That's not true," she said weakly. "Isn't it? Then why don't you show Derek your text history with Jake Morrison? You remember Jake, don't you? Your ex from college? The one you've been complaining to about Derek's performance issues?" Derek spun around to face Cass. "What is he talking about? Nothing. He's making it up." But the damage was done. Derek had already been pushed to his breaking point by days of humiliation and frustration. The suggestion that Cass was cheating on him the same way she'd cheated on me was the final straw. "You lying witch," he shouted. "I gave up everything for you." "Derek, please. I destroyed my reputation, spent my savings, made myself a laughingstock in this town. And for what? So you could run back to your college boyfriend?" They were screaming at each other in my driveway, putting on a show for the entire neighborhood. I sat back down and picked up my coffee, enjoying the spectacle. This was better than anything I could have planned. Derek grabbed Cass by the shoulders and shook her. "How long has this been going on? Get your hands off me. Not until you tell me the truth." "Hey," I called out. "Take it easy there, Derek. That's still my wife you're manhandling." He spun around, his face contorted with rage. Your wife? Your wife is a lying, cheating..." "Careful," I warned. "There are children in this neighborhood." Derek let go of Cass and turned his full attention to me. "This is all your fault. You set this up, didn't you? You planned this whole thing." "Planned what? Your girlfriend cheating on you?" "I'm flattered that you think I have that much influence over her behavior, but I think you're giving me too much credit. You manipulative piece of..." "Derek," my voice went cold. "I'm going to stop you right there. You're on my property, threatening me and assaulting my wife. I've got neighbors watching, probably recording this on their phones. You want to finish that sentence and see what happens next?" He looked around and seemed to notice for the first time that we had an audience. Mrs. Henderson was standing on her porch with her phone out. The Johnsons were watching from their living room window. Even old Mr. Peterson had come outside to see what the commotion was about. Derek's shoulders sagged as the fight went out of him. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd lost everything and gained nothing. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." I stood up and walked to the edge of my porch. It's been over since the moment you decided to mess with my family. You just didn't know it yet. Derek stumbled back to his car, leaving Cass standing alone in my driveway. She looked small and lost, nothing like the confident woman who'd betrayed me for a real estate agent with a fancy car and empty promises. Eli, she said softly, I'm sorry. I know you are. Is there any chance we could try again? I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the woman I'd fallen in love with, the dreams we'd shared, the future we'd planned together. Then I thought about the text messages, the lies, the $15,000, and the months of deception. No, Cass, there's not. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I guess I deserve that. Yeah, you do. She walked to Derek's car and got in. They drove away without another word, leaving me alone on my porch with my coffee and my victory. It didn't feel as good as I'd expected it to, but it felt like justice. And sometimes, justice is enough. The divorce papers were filed the following Monday. Derek left town 2 weeks later, his real estate business in ruins and his reputation destroyed. Cass moved back in with her parents and started seeing a therapist. I kept the house, the car, and what was left of our savings. More importantly, I kept my dignity and the respect of my community. The vacation to Japan was everything I'd hoped it would be. I spent 2 weeks exploring temples and gardens, eating incredible food, and remembering who I was before I became half of a couple. When I came back, I was ready to start over, not with forgiveness or reconciliation, but with the knowledge that some betrayals can't be undone, and some people don't deserve second chances. Sometimes the underdog wins not by being better, but by being smarter. And sometimes that's enough. Stvarina, October 27, 2025, 11 hours 47 minutes and 44 seconds.